Welcome to the Punting is Winning podcast. Just two fans talking all things Hawkeyes. Here are your hosts, JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye Sports fans, to Punting is Winning, the All Iowa podcast. It is another episode. It is another week in the books in the summer in Iowa here. Still looking for newsworthy things happening on the Iowa front, so we're going to fill this with a little bit different format than what we're normally going to do. Talk about, kind of like we did last week, talk about things that
probably more general observations and
the what ifs type of stuff. If you were in charge of stuff. But first, let's cover the question of the week last week, which was, if you could bring any Ferentz era quarterback back for this season for this team, who would it be, and why would it be Brad Banks?
Why wouldn't it be Brad Banks?
Yeah,
it's always going to be. And I mean, we saw a lot of answers to that, and I think Brad Banks was like every time, every answer was Brad Banks, and that's not a bad answer. That's actually the answer. I would say I think Brad Banks would be the obvious choice. But you know, if I had to have a second choice, it would be Ricky Stanzi, of course. But
because I think I don't know if I do Ricky Stanzi. If I'm looking at it in the aspect of a Tim Lester style offense, I'm probably thinking more of a Drew Tate.
Oh.
Somebody who's got a little bit of elusiveness, who can run a little bit. Stanzi's was more statuesque, more of a drop back passer, not really an overly mobile. I mean, he could, Beathard would be good in that situation too.
Yeah.
But I don't look at CJ Beathard as a straight up runner. I could see Drew Tate as more of a straight up running type of quarterback, but clearly Brad Banks is the head and shoulders,
the obvious choice,
prototypical quarterback that Tim Lester would want in that situation. And I think as a fan, that's what we would want to. I mean, just would make the most sense. He'd be the most dynamic and bring the most to the table for that offense.
Yeah, there wasn't too many quarterbacks better than Brad when he was in the when the chips were down and he needed to either flush himself out of the pocket and run for 15, 20 yards and was elusive enough to maybe, beat the spy or the linebacker that's watching him. He could be elusive if he needed to be. He could throw the ball very well on the run. I think he was just a great quarterback all along. And, we had a really nice season when he quarterbacked, a really good season.
I can only think of one time off the top of my head where I think he made the wrong decision or made a kind of, I don't want to say a bonehead play because that's not really true, but I go with the year before when Iowa played Michigan and they brought him in a situation. Iowa they were starting to build those Sims back up into a formidable foe. And they had Michigan on the ropes. And I remember him throwing a pass where he was rolling out to the right, kind of eluding pressure, and kind of threw off of his foot a little awkwardly and threw a pick that eventually, I don't want to say cost them the game because it didn't truly cost them the game, but it was kind of a turning point. We had the momentum and it just kind of killed that momentum. Michigan ended up beating Iowa, I think by 10 that year, if I remember right. Could have been by 13, might have been 30-17. I don't remember off the top of my head. I just remember that play being kind of the one where if he could go back and change that, that'd probably be a different read or a different, he'd just run out of bounds or something instead of trying to make a play for it. But I think that did lead him into the following year of what he was able to do, and he kind of learned from that. So,
sure. Yeah. Well, all those that answered, I appreciate the answers. I know that was not a terribly difficult question, but it was good to get the feedback.
Yeah. Well, speaking of question of the week, let's touch on our question of the week this week, which is more of a general statement of what kind of 4th of July traditions does everybody have? I know we've probably done something similar to this before, maybe first game of the year traditions, last game of the year. I know we've done last game of the year football season traditions when we were tailgating, or last home game. So curious as to what people's ideas are for what they have for 4th of July traditions. And, kind of give me an idea of what your 4th of July traditions are in your area.
Do you go to the lake? Do you go to the beach? Do you just sit around and do burgers and dogs and watch sports on TV? I don't personally have a tradition. I tend to throw something on the smoker, whether it be a pork butt or pork loin, or this time I'm doing a brisket. So anybody in the neighborhood that wants to come by, I'll have plenty of brisket available if y'all want to come through.
What day is that?
I will probably have that on Saturday. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's conflicts with mine.
Well, it's we've got beef coming, and I need to get the freezer cleaned out of what we have left. So, and brisket is not something you cook every weekend. So I have a couple of those, and I need to get rid of some so I can get room for the new stuff. That's really the only reason I'm doing brisket.
You do have a family member in the Des Moines area that has a smoker as well that would be happy to smoke one of those as well.
Oh, really?
Want to get rid of it.
That one I covet. I covet those, and
yeah. Brisket's a little expensive right now, so
it is. Luckily, I do it. I have it as part of like when we buy half a beef from the family. I just have them put the brisket in there. So I don't know what they cost. I just know that it's part of the package, and
a good sized brisket will run you about $70 or $80.
Ooh, really?
Yeah.
I remember back in the day when I was buying those on a somewhat regular basis. I think I paid, I want to say it was like $33 for a 10-pounder, something like that.
That's definitely not that case anymore.
Yeah, no, that was a few years back. That was like in 2016, 2015, something like that. But yeah. No, I don't have any traditions, but I will tell a quick story, and you can fill in whatever I don't have because you were there too. But when we were just young kids, I know you're 3 years and 10 months or 11 months younger than me, but Dad was working on the police department in the local town that we grew up in. And I remember back in the day, Iowa, fireworks were not legal. They were not legal like they are now. And
they were in Missouri.
They were in Missouri, and we weren't that far from Missouri. So there were people that would go down to Missouri and buy their fireworks and then come back to Iowa and shoot them off out in the country, or out of earshot of the local authorities. Well, one of the officers, and it wasn't Dad, he pulled somebody over in town, or they were speeding or something, and pulled him over, and he had a bunch of fireworks in their back seat or front seat. And of course, he informed them at the time that fireworks were not legal and that he would have to confiscate those. And so he did. He confiscated a large sum of fireworks. Very large. And the police chief was looking for some place to destroy those or to get rid of them. And he turned to my dad and says, "Don't you have a couple kids?" Dad says, "Yeah." And he goes, "Don't you live in the country?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why don't you dispose of these fireworks properly?" And he gave Dad a wink, and he brought those home, and we had a really fun 4th of July. We must have been, I don't know if I was maybe 11 or 12 at the time. You might have been around 8.
Yeah, something like that.
And we had all kinds of fireworks, and we were shooting them off. I'm sure the neighbor across the road was not happy with us, but we tried to be respectful and didn't do it late at night or anything like that. And just doing it during the day. And
the neighbor across the road was former law enforcement as well, so he didn't really say a whole lot. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
I also remember Dad was coaching Little League at that time, and had a couple of the kids from the Little League team that were from the country come over and was there during that disposal period. We'll call
We
it.
had a good time. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The only thing I was worried about was when you're in the middle of July and we had hay down at the time, and he was worried about it being too dry and having something catching on fire and having it, but it never did do that. We're fortunate. I think there was probably a couple of gross of fire, the what's the ones with the sticks that shoot out?
Bottle rockets.
Bottle rockets. I mean, we had so many bottle rockets. We were shooting them off. We were taping them together and shooting them off 2 or 3 at a time. It was, we were figuring out very inventive ways of getting rid of those. I'll tell you.
Oh yeah. I
But
think
it was
if you
fun.
put it into perspective of inflationary value, we're probably talking $700-800 worth of
I
fireworks
would have
easily.
yeah, I would say 1,000 probably. There was a lot.
There was
It
a
was like
ton, and it was.
yeah.
I mean, it was. We were like a kid at Christmas that year because back in those days, sparklers and snakes were the thing that you got. That's the only thing you could really do unless you were sneaky enough to sneak down to Missouri and bring back a trunk load. And we started to, I think, do that a little bit more as time went on. But
we got a little older.
Yeah.
But I have all 5 of my fingers and thumbs, or my 4 fingers and 1 thumb. I have all mine. So we weren't victims of the short fuses or anything like that,
Right.
luckily.
Yeah.
But we had a good time. It was a lot of fun.
Mentioned traditions. I do have a tradition on the 4th of July. My best friend has been doing a get together since I was 18 years old. So what's 35, 36 years now. And in those 36 years, I think this is the 36th year, in those 36 years, there has only been 2 people, himself and myself, that have been to all 36. And I don't plan to miss anytime soon. It is. It used to be a real big gathering. We're talking live bands, cookout, smoked brisket or pulled pork, or just probably anywhere between 35 and 50 people. And everybody'd bring something. We'd have a little fireworks display. Sometimes you'd set up a volleyball net. There'd be that kind of stuff. We'd have sit around the fire pit at night and tell the same stories for the last 35 years that make us laugh every single year, because inevitably there would be somebody there new that had never heard that story. Or even if they had, it's still one of those that it's a story that was funny enough that you just got to tell it again. And we, believe me, for over course of 30 some years, we have lots of stories of things that we did when we were younger. I'm sure this Saturday will be more of the same. It's gotten a lot smaller as people have moved on. A lot of the original group has moved out of state. But there's a core group of about 12 to 14 of us that are there every year, sometimes maybe a little less, that we just have a good time. Just sit back and have our adult beverages and roast hot dogs over the fire, sit around, listen to music. He's got a good setup where he's got outdoor speakers. So he just puts on a heavy metal Spotify playlist that has all sorts of stuff on it that, you might just be listening and hear something you haven't heard in 25 years. It's a really good time, and it's a good time to be able to hang out with the people who I've grown up with all my life. And that is basically the group that's there nowadays. Is this the people I have known since I was in 2nd grade.
Yeah.
So 40 plus years of being friends with these people. They're not friends anymore. They're just family to me.
Yeah.
So that is my 4th of July tradition. Haven't missed it. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The only thing that could keep me from missing it would be if I was hospitalized or dead. I always plan my vacations and things around that so that I don't miss it.
So here's a follow-up question to that. Since you don't go out on 4th of July other than to your friends for the party that you have every year. I was going to ask, what do you think the best fireworks display you've ever seen was? But since you don't really have a lot of opportunity to see.
We don't necessarily have it on the 4th every year. Like, it's usually the Saturday that's closest to the 4th. So in this case, we're going to do it the 5th. So we would have opportunities to see fireworks displays on the 4th.
Okay.
I think the best one that I saw was probably my first or second year living in Norwalk. They always had a very good display. And then we had an apartment in Norwalk, and we drive out to the south edge of town where they did the display. You could just pull along the road out there, and you just have a really good seat. And then as you drive back into town, then you start getting the displays from Principal Park, and you could stand out on our balcony at the apartment and watch that display. And it was just, it happening all around you. So that was always fun. Where we're at now, there's pretty good displays here in the Altoona and Bondurant area. I don't know that I've really got one that it would just be like, oh, this is the best display I've ever seen. But I'd say if I had to choose, probably that first or second year in Norwalk was probably the best one.
Well, I have, I guess, basically two. One of them that stands out for personal reasons. But that Yankee Doodle Pops back in the day when they would do it in Des Moines, we, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law and my wife and I, went to one of the parking garages overlooking the fireworks display. And we just basically sat either in the car, or if it was warm enough, we'd get out and stand at the edge of the parking garage and watch the fireworks and never have to worry about crowds or anything like that. But the one I think that I enjoyed the most is I lived in Clear Lake from 93 to 96. And all 3 of those years, plus a few years after I had already left, I came back. They had the best fireworks display. The Clear Lake people, they put it on. What they do is they get a barge out on the lake, several hundred yards out. And then they have all these people that would at night around that live in that area, especially a lot of them on the lake. They would bring their boats, and they are supposed to stay, a certain amount away from the barge in case something happens. But they would pull out onto the lake, and it was dark, and all you could see was their little lights on their boats. That you'd had to have lights on your boat, and it would look like a little city out on the water. And then the fireworks went up, and all the lights, and you could see the boats, and it's quite. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely urge you to go to Clear Lake and watch their fireworks display. They are something to behold, and I really enjoyed those.
I think I came up and went
you might have
with you.
You might have.
I'm thinking, because I remember the reflection off the water, or you could see the reflection of the cascading fireworks on the water, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I haven't been up there a long time. It is
calm.
Yeah, I haven't been up there for a while, so I one of these days, if I could find someone to watch our dogs, I'd like to take the wife up there on the night, for the day, and then watch the fireworks display and get a hotel room or something, come back next day. But that's down the road. We'll do that sometime here, probably in the next few years. But
yeah, let's hear what everybody else's 4th of July traditions are. That's always something that I find interesting, and ways of maybe incorporating some of the things that other people do into our celebrations as well.
Yeah. Well, getting back to Iowa, there's not a lot going on. So I had to go out and pick up little snippets of information that people may not know, and it's not going to amount to a whole lot, but you have something you want to talk about after that. But we'll hit these real quick, and if there's any discussion to be had on, we'll talk about it. I did find out that when Iowa goes to the media days at the end of July, they're going to be bringing 3 players: Logan Jones, Ethan Herkett, and Cohen Entringer. So that's, you got an offensive lineman, 2 defensive linemen, and a defensive back. So really nobody from...
I'm kind of surprised that Gronowski's not a part of that, or even Xavier Wampa.
Yeah, I would expect maybe Xavier Wampa to go, but I think these 3 will represent very well. And they are, I think, aren't all three of these guys 6-year seniors?
Could be entering or maybe not. But
I
I think
know
it's
Herkett for sure
more
is.
about. I think it's more about the blue collar Iowa way of life that
Yeah.
shows more here. It's these guys have really been the ones that they're not the high talented or highly sought after recruits that have busted their butt to get where they're at. So I'm okay with it. I'm perfectly
Yeah.
fine with it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that a year like this, where maybe not taking Gronowski is just simply the fact that he's not been in the program very long, and you don't want to upset others. But
Or
hey,
when they are asked questions about last year, he can't answer any of it
yeah,
because he wasn't
exactly.
here, that kind
Yep.
of thing. Oh, how do you feel like this year's team going in versus last year's team?
Yeah.
He wouldn't be able to answer that. So, yeah, it's good to have somebody that represents the team that's been there several years, and they all do. So that's good. Speaking of Mark Gronowski, I did notice that he had gone to the Manning quarterback camp, passing camp. Just reports out of that camp are good. That he's throwing the ball well. He's got a lot of upside. I don't know how much you take out of that. You just kind of go, hey, that's great, and you're going to have to show me on the field. So I'm not going to get all hyped up about him looking great at a Manning camp, according to some reporter. It's not going to be.
We have somebody that went to the Manning camp not too long ago that came back and just really wasn't very good.
Petrus?
I'm thinking that's who it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that worked out real good.
I don't want to crap on the kid because
no,
I think that was kind of a combination of a lot of things for him. Not just talent wise, it was
the system, the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, he just was set up to fail.
But you still, when you're out there, you got to make plays, and he didn't really make plays either. So, we're seeing more of the men's basketball videos that they've dropped. Really fun to watch.
Interestingly enough, I did see one that we talked last week about the mic'd up sessions for the football, and then all of a sudden I see a coach mic'd up for basketball. So I was like, hey, that's almost like they were listening to me.
Yeah, they might have been. I doubt, though.
Yeah, I doubt it.
I doubt. Saw a video from the women's basketball team, their summer workouts, and it was more of an interview rather than actual video of them practicing. It was more like after the workout videos or the interviews that I think Taylor Stremlow has been kind of taking a more of a vocal leadership role as a sophomore, which is really nice to see. I'd like to see that more out of like your Kylie Feuerbachs and your Hannah Stolkes and that kind of thing. But
Hannah's not there right now.
Well, she's not. No, she's playing for the USA, whatever you want, a junior women's team, whatever. Yeah. She scored 7 points and had some rebounds and some assists the other day against Chile. I think that's how you say that. So she's doing good things, and the new freshmen, and I'm hearing good things about them. Addie Deal and the girl Layla Hayes. Yeah, they're excited about their height this year. I think they said they're a little taller than they've been, which is that's always going to help. Height and ability. It's basketball, that's what you got to have. Yeah. Wanted to really quickly hit on the Iowa darling, Kaylin Clark. She got 1.293 million All-Star votes. Set a record.
Shocking.
Yeah. And she's the captain of the East. Now, the way I understand this is that she gets to pick the team, right? Her own team. They do a kind of a draft type of situation with Nafisa Collier, I think was the second largest or second highest voting. And she got
I have no idea.
Over 1 million votes. She's good. Don't get me wrong. Nafisa Collier would be somebody you could build your WNBA team around. She's that good.
I'm surprised it wasn't somebody like an Asia Wilson, though.
Well, Asia was on when she did get votes. She didn't get one of the top twos, but yeah, she's a good player too. I think she's had some injury issues that's kind of kept her out. And I know so is Caitlin. Hopefully she can be back for tomorrow's game, but we'll see. Sometimes injuries like that take a while, and you need to get them healed up right the first time, or if you don't, they just keep nagging you all season. And
take the
I think
time
you'd
you need
rather,
to get it back to.
yeah, you'd rather just get it done and take the time you need to get it done rather than miss a game here or there because you're not up to it,
or just being effective. I think that's part of the issue that she's had the last couple of games. Is the injury's been nagging. She's just not been effective. It's affected her shot. It's affected her play. She's still going to be even. I'm sorry, but even in the 80%, Caitlin Clark is better than 100% some other players.
I agree.
So, it's just from her aspect, it was the part that really took the biggest hit was her shooting.
Yeah, it was like she couldn't push off or something wasn't quite right with her legs, and that's majority of jump shots are with your legs. You ask any basketball shooting coach, they'll tell you the legs are a good share of it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, that's all I really have. I didn't have a lot more. There's some other things. I think they hired a softball assistant coach. Not really going to get into that. Yeah, I just happened.
Yeah, I had not seen that yet, but that's hard to really talk about when you don't know I don't know a whole lot about the softball world as it is. So where they're coming from, the pedigree, the background, it's a little difficult for me to talk intelligently about that.
Yeah, kind of foreign to us.
Yeah, but I did want to mention that I don't want to say called out, I guess, but for lack of a better term, I was called out in the comments about what my ideal replacement coach for football would be like. Is Buck Wildhawk? Is that right?
I think that's right. Mm-hmm.
So wanted to know what my ideal coach would be, age, whatever. Gave it some thought. I would be looking for a younger coach, probably in his late 30s, early 40s. Probably that 35 to 42 range. Would prefer to have somebody who's played. That way they've got a better understanding of the game. But that's not a deal breaker as long as they understand the game and they know not necessarily just the X's and O's, but the nuances of the game as well. I would want somebody who is charismatic, who can recruit, who is also charismatic enough to recruit coaches to coach with him. I would prefer to have somebody who's defensive minded first, just simply because I've never been the kind of person that would say in college football that defense is lesser importance than offense. I don't want to watch a game where, last team that has the ball is probably the team that's going to win because the defense can't stop anybody on either side. Yeah, that's exciting. If you like watching teams that score 50 points, that's the Big 12 right there. Go for it. But, I would prefer a team that, I'd prefer a 28-10 game over a 55-53 game, because I know that I get into a certain portion of the game that the defense is going to lock that thing down. And I've got a good enough offense that I put up some points. Maybe I get a 3 and out and I get a good field position. I score another one, whatever. So I'd want somebody who's a little bit more defensive minded, but is not so defensive minded that they would cut their nose off to spite their face when it comes to that. They've got to have the acumen to be able to play and put out a serviceable, optimal offense. I am a ball control type of person, so that's kind of one of the things that I'll give Kirk Ferentz credit for. I think he tends to take it a little bit too much to the extreme of, well, I've got a 7-point lead, let's sit on it now. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. When you've got your foot on the person's throat, you stay on it. You don't let off of it for any reason, unless you're down to, final 5 minutes of the game, you got a 18, 20-point lead. I'm going to probably run the ball and just try to bleed clock at that point. So I guess for the purpose of this discussion, somebody who's 35 to 40 years old with a playing background, comes from a championship pedigree, who's coached more than just as a position coach. I'd want them to have been a coordinator somewhere, just because I think that helps them understand the nuances of being a head coach and what it takes to be a head coach. So I'd want somebody who's had coordinator experience, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at a Power 5 level. It could be at a Group of 5 level. It could be, an offensive coordinator at a Liberty or Coastal Carolina or something. But it would need to be someplace where they've had proven success, and someplace where they've had proven success as a recruiter, not just, well, I've brought in a couple of these guys. I want somebody who's like year in and year out. These are high performing players that, hey, if they're getting poached by the bigger teams, the Power 5 teams, and they're your recruits, then you're obviously doing something right. You've got a better eye for talent than most people. So that's kind of what I would say. If I was looking for a replacement for Kirk Ferentz at this point, that's what I'd look for. And it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that has ties to the program. Would it be nice if they had a tie to the program? Sure. But I honestly think I want somebody at this point that has more of a global name than a regional name, if you know what I'm saying. I want them to be able to recruit more nationally than locally, because as much as there is talent in, I would say, the 6-state area around Iowa, which would be Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Nebraska, Missouri, Kansas, maybe even, South Dakota, maybe even getting into Michigan or Indiana. I would prefer that they could say, oh, I'm going to grab this kid from Florida and be more focused on that region of Florida, because there's so many guys in Florida and Texas and California,
Pennsylvania,
that are, yes, exactly, Ohio, that are talented, that are more talented than some of the people you're pulling in regionally, that get overlooked because there's just so many spots that, there's only so many spots that the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the big boys can fill. That's why you're seeing a lot of these transfers, these guys poaching these guys from MAC schools, from Group of 5 schools that are just overperforming or underlooked in the recruiting aspect. And I wish you could find somebody that could delve more into that and really poach that area of the recruiting realm, as opposed to just sticking regionally. I get the regional aspect of it, because a lot of kids are, want to play someplace that's familiar, someplace that's close for the parents, someplace that's close because they're used to that environment. But, if you can bring a kid in that, is good enough to play at an Ohio State or an Alabama, but just from a numbers aspect, they just don't have room for them. They can only bring in so many 5 stars. Bring them on. That's what I say. Now, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
Oh, a lot of what you said. A young, energetic coach, 35 to 42, good lineage, somebody that's been a coordinator at a successful program, or even a head coach at a smaller program that's been successful. If a guy at Toledo is running his teams at 11-1 every year, and winning the championship of the MAC or whatever conference they're in, I'd be looking at somebody like that has a good background, has the ability to really, just understand the youth of today and be able to talk to them in a manner that is not a legacy type of speaking. Like, you don't want to talk to them like if you were born in the 1960s, and we talk about the way things used to be. Well, you need to get on their level and recruit them that in that form and fashion. I'm not sure exactly how I need to say that, but
I understand what you're saying.
Just and somebody that wants to be here and wants to build something at Iowa and is energetic. That's the thing. Energetic builds the program the right way, and it builds an excitement level around the program and gets people in the seats, which Iowa, you never have a problem with that. But, you still don't want to hire the wrong guy.
You want a coach that's relatable to the youth and relatable to the players.
And, I think a mix of offense and defense, not a that he specifies one over the other, because you've got to have both to win. So I want somebody that's, knows what he's doing on offense, can hire people to do defense if he's not as well versed, but he needs to get a really quality defensive coach, kind of like what we've got now, because Phil Parker is probably one of the best in the business. But we'll see. Tim Lester only has had the 1 year, and we'll see how he progresses into year 2 as far as how the offense progresses.
So one caveat that I do want to throw out, the one thing that I do not want to see, as a traditionalist or as a fan, one thing that I don't necessarily want to see in a new coach is somebody who, I don't know how I put this. I don't want a Matt Rule, Dan Lanning, Jim Harbaugh type that's going to jump in your swimming pool because or the snake oil salesman that is PJ Fleck. I also don't want to see somebody who's going to embrace the turnover chain and the, just this. I get that sometimes that's the things that the kids want. That's just not something that I'm interested in as a fan of college athletics. I think that is too much about me and not enough about the team. I'm very much a team first person anyway. So I don't like the individual accolades of, hey, look at me. I just made an intercept. Okay, great. You did your job.
Yeah.
Now we're going to reward you by putting a big chain and letting you play the fool on the camera, because that's what that's basically all about, is just showing yourself up on camera. And I just don't like that. That's the one thing I do appreciate a lot about a Kirk Ferentz-led team is it is about the team. It is not about individual accolades. The guys are very
they bought into it.
Yeah, and they're bought into it. So, hate me for that. Call me an old fuddy-duddy, whatever. I don't care. That's just my own personal opinion. I don't like those things, the turnover chains, the little gimmicks. I think it's kind of like the old adage of, and I'm going to pick on Iowa State here for a minute, which, that's not unusual. When you change your uniforms year in and year out, you don't have an identity. When you have to have a turnover chain or whatever gimmick, some of them have a sword or whatever, you don't have an identity as a team. That's my opinion on it. You have to have something to create an identity, and that's just, I don't care for that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of agree with that too. I think the kids need to have some fun, but by the same token, it needs to be done in a classy manner, not a showy.
Team, that's great.
Yeah, celebrate with your team, and if you want accolades, they'll come at the end of the season. If you're good, they will come.
Absolutely.
You will get those trophies, and you will get those accolades, the all conference honors and that kind of thing. They'll recognize you for that.
The only accolade that should matter to you, there's only 2 accolades that should matter to you. 1, your degree when you graduate from that school, and number 2, your NFL draft position.
Yeah.
Because the rest are just trophies. And when all's said and done, unless you're like the Heisman Trophy winner, which honestly, I don't know that I could tell you who the Heisman Trophy was 3 years ago. I couldn't remember. I mean, I'm sure if I thought about it long enough, I would be able to come up with it. But those things get forgotten easily. It's who's made a career of themselves in the NFL. Oh, well, that guy did.
Yeah, you can remember.
He stands out to me. Yeah. So I did have another question though. While we're talking football, and I kind of was thinking about this the other night. Kind of feeling sick this weekend a little bit, so I had some time to just kind of lay around and think about this. with the current landscape of the Big Ten at 18 teams, let's say you are the Big Ten commissioner and you are tasked with finding 2 more teams to fill out a 20-team conference, super conference. Who would those 2 teams be? And why?
I would go with anybody, right? Anybody I want.
Yeah, you're not kicking anybody out of the conference right now either.
Okay.
You're just adding 2 teams to the existing conference.
Well, I think for proximity, I would have to go with Kansas State on the west side, maybe, and West Virginia on the east side, perhaps.
Okay.
Those are just off the cuff. But
okay. Any particular reason? Just
Kansas State for proximity and tradition. I think they've been decent. I know they're back in the 60s and 70s. They weren't great, but they've gotten much better in the last probably 30, 40 years.
Iowa wasn't very great in the 70s either.
Correct. And then as far as West Virginia, it's like you're out there in the East. It just kind of makes sense to put them in. You could have went with Pitt. I think I'd rather just
Syracuse.
go with somebody like, yeah, you could have went with Syracuse. I'm not a big fan of Syracuse, so I'd really rather just keep them.
Yeah, and this is football only. This is not basketball related at all. Okay. And see, for me, I would probably have gone with probably Boise State, just because I think they deserve to be in a power conference at this point, and they're joining the Pac-12, which, okay, it's, I think, technically going to be considered a power conference, but I don't know if it's going to meet the criteria. And you could probably have gone with, Oregon State or Washington State because they are out there already. And then, if we're going to do a straight East-West type of thing, I would say I would go Boise State on the West and probably Virginia or Virginia Tech on the East. Just because I think traditionally they're good teams that can bring some value and bring that Virginia, although you already have the market, the Virginia market with Maryland and Rutgers. I mean, it's not the best product out there in the world, but you still bring that in, and probably Penn State brings in that market as well, Ohio State. I just think adding those 2 teams would be, from a balance standpoint, would be good. Now, on top of that, would you be in favor? So now you're at a 20-team conference. Would you be in favor of going with 2 10-team divisions?
Yeah.
And with those 2 10-team divisions, you play a 9-game conference schedule against your entire division. So everybody plays your division side every year. Your 10th game would be kind of that, like we did with the last time we talked about this, championship week, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, so forth and so on down the line. That's your matchups. Because you're obviously going to have 1 versus 1 be your championship matchup. And then your 2 regular or 2 non-conference games can be however you want. In Iowa's case, probably be a layup in Iowa State, something like that, or maybe 2 layups and you get rid of the Iowa State because now you're playing a 10-game Power 5 conference schedule, basically. Would you be in favor of something like that?
Oh, absolutely. It from a fan standpoint, from a watching every Saturday and seeing just sometimes garbage games being on, I'd like to see that because you're going to have good games most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have, as you split your teams up East and West, you're always going to have, everybody's going to fill out through their number 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 10. That's having a true round robin in each side is ideal. Because then you really don't have an issue of where I didn't play that team, so them and I are the same record. So we have to pick a tiebreaker as to who gets to play in the championship against the other division. So having that is ideal. I like that idea.
So
There
would you
have
be
to
in
be some
favor?
tweaks.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of people would say this is getting back into the old Big Ten East, Big Ten West format. But I think, and we kind of chit-chatted a little bit about it earlier, with the addition of Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA to the conference, I think you draw the natural lines. Let's go with your model here, where you take Kansas State and West Virginia. So now you take your West Division would be Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA, Nebraska, K-State, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin is 9, and then you kind of have to draw the line of where is it, Northwestern or is it Illinois that goes to the west side. I don't know. I mean, if you wanted to do geographically, I don't know if you try to get down to the longitude, latitude to figure out which was which. Maybe in our case, we'd say Illinois, just to make because they're a little bit more competitive. Then you look at the East with Rutgers, Maryland, Penn State, West Virginia, Ohio State, Indiana, Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, and Northwestern. Did I cover that right? Yeah.
I think so.
I think you're looking at, the old adage of, well, the Big Ten West was always easy and the Big Ten East was so much tougher. I think that's a different story now. I think you're looking at a very top-heavy Big Ten East, but you're looking at a much more balanced Big Ten West. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah, with Oregon being usually, especially lately, been very good. USC traditionally has been good. They're never really a bad team.
Washington's very solid.
Washington was in the national championship game the year before last. You're adding the difficulty level quite a bit more than what you used to have in the Big Ten West.
Well, and you throw in K-State.
And you throw in K-State, who actually has had, a pretty decent last few years, and they're looking like they could be good again.
Yeah. I think you're definitely looking at a far more competitive Big Ten West than East. Now, that's not to say that the East is not going to, wouldn't necessarily win a majority of the championships, because let's be honest, it's a 3-team race in the East with the rest of the teams kind of filling in the cracks, so to speak, because traditionally Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State are going to be your powers. You might get Michigan State have a good year here and there. Purdue will have a good year every once in a while. And throw in West Virginia, who's, I'm not sure what to expect out of them yet this year with the new coaching staff. But I think it's very top heavy, whereas the West is very much more balanced. And outside of Oregon, who's been traditionally good lately, it could be anybody. So just kind of one of those things I was thinking about. Would you be in favor of something like that? And, here's another caveat to throw in there. Let's say we don't do it by East-West. Let's say we do it by a 5-year, what's the word I'm looking for? A 5-year,
like rolling average of win percentage or something.
Yeah. Let's say So you take all 20 teams and you take them over the last 5 years and you say, okay, this is their winning percentage. And like you said, you do kind of like a snake draft, and you reformat these every 5 years, where it's like the number 1 team, the number 2 team, the number 3 team, the number 4 team, and you just kind of do a snake all the way down to 20, where you're never saying, well, here's the top 10 teams against the bottom 10 teams. It's always there's the top 2, the next 2, the next 2, the next 2.
You're trying to create an equal balance as the winning percentages.
And those divisions get rolled over every 5 years to keep that competitive balance.
Yeah.
I'd be in favor of that. The reason why I say 5 years is with red shirts, that's typically a kid's career. You're not going to, after this year, probably not going to see any super seniors, because you're going to be out of the COVID eligibility. So now we're back to 5 years to play 4.
What about scheduling, though? If the scheduling becomes an issue, then you maybe could push it out to like a 10-year deal rather than a 5.
Yeah, it's something to think about, as far as how could you do it if you were commissioner of the Big Ten and you wanted to come up with the most competitive, most lucrative format? How would you do it? Would you be in favor of doing something like that? Does that make the most sense? I don't know. Just like I said, it's something I was thinking about. It's like, wonder if something like that would work, or if people would be interested in something like that. Again, we can talk till we're blue in the face. There's nothing we can say that would change and make this happen. It's just kind of one of those, if I was supreme leader of the Big Ten Conference, would I try something like that? Sure, I'd look into it.
Yeah. We'd have to look at all the loopholes and all the odd things that would have to be, and have to figure out maybe have to jump some hoops and.
Yeah, and that's another question for the audience is, what are your thoughts on that? Would you be in favor of that kind of a system? If not, hey, throw us out there what you think might work, or maybe you just say, hey, I like it the way it is now. I like the idea of either playing. Basically, you're breaking it into two power conferences into one, and you're just facing them off at the end of the year.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of either playing the same 9 teams because they're in your division, and that gives you a true division winner.
Yeah.
Or something like we talked about last week, where you play one protected rival and then you roll across every other year on the opposite side. So you don't necessarily have divisions that you play everybody every 2 years, basically. So I that way you get away from all these, Iowa doesn't play Ohio State for 5 years. There was times where Iowa missed Ohio State for 5 years. And yeah, that was benefit to us. I would rather play them. That's a better gauge of what kind of team you have. You could have a team that goes out there and wins 12 games, but you're not playing the best of the best, and then you go get exposed against somebody that is as good as they are. And we've seen that happen.
Yes.
So
yes.
I just think that iron sharpens iron, and you want to play the best, and you need to play the best at least every other year.
Well, we want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July before we get done here. I will forget if I don't say it now. So happy 4th of July.
All I was going to say was, well, I don't even remember what I was going to say, so never mind.
We had 249 years of this country, and proud of it. And next year will be a 250-year bash, and it'll be a lot of fun, and hope I'm around for it.
Yeah, hope we're all around for it. So, well, as always, check us out on our social media. The drill at this point in time, and check out our merch store if you're interested in supporting the channel or supporting the Iowa Athletics. All that extra money that we would make from that would go to the Iowa Flight Fund or to the Swarm, whichever, if you specifically say, hey, I'd rather this go to the Swarm, that's fine. We'll figure it out. If you're interested in that at all, please feel free to click the QR code as it's popped up at the beginning and someplace here at the end of the show, and check out the merchandise that's out there. So appreciate the listenership, and we hope that everybody has a great and healthy and safe 4th of July. And you come back next week with all 10 fingers and no hospital bills.
Yeah.
With that said, we'll wrap it up with Go Hawks and get out of here. So,
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.